My son, an airline pilot, called and whispered, "Mom, is your daughter-in-law home?" I froze, staring at her in the kitchen, stirring a pot as if nothing were wrong, without raising my voice. I reached for the proof I had been gathering, knowing the storm had only just begun. What they thought was control was about to unravel right before their eyes. Before I share the story, I'd love to know, how are you doing today? The last light of the day stretched across my kitchen tiles, a golden wash that made the floor shine like it had been freshly polished. The collard greens simmered low on the stove, their earthy scent mingling with cornbread cooling on the counter. This house had been my anchor since my husband passed, and I treated it like a ledger, bills paid, deed tucked safe, mail read and filed. I was Eudora Linnell, 68 years old, mother, grandmother, widow, and I carried my years with a steady back. My neighbors knew me as the woman who kept her lawn neat and her Sunday tables set, even if it was just for me and whoever wandered in. As I stirred the pot, I thought, home should be the place where truth never knocks. Grace, I had learned, was keeping your table ready even when you suspect a storm is near. The phone rang, its sharp trill cutting into the hum of the stove fan. Caller ID lit up Jarrett Kincaid, my son. My heart softened. He was calling from the airport, about to board. "Hey, baby," I said, smiling into the receiver, but his voice came clipped. "Urgent. Mom, is Valora home?" My eyes flicked toward the stove, where Valora stood, apron tied neat, skillet hissing. "Yes, she's making dinner," I replied, puzzled. Jarrett whispered, words tight as a coiled spring. "Impossible? I just watched her board my flight to New York." My hand tightened on the phone. "Say that again." He did, slower, like a man who'd checked his list twice. The world tilted on its axis. I forced calm into my voice. "We'll talk soon. Son, fly safe." The call ended, but a crack had opened in the walls I thought were solid, I told myself. When truth rattles the china, you don't slam the cabinet, you hold the door steady. That's when I heard it footsteps, slow and deliberate, across the hardwood, the faucet shut. A knife tapped once against the board. I knew my house. I could map its geography blind. Someone passed the hallway. I felt the air shift. From the kitchen came Valora's easy tone. "Want the rice fluffy or sticky?" My ears pricked too casual, almost staged. I looked toward the ceiling vent, grounding myself in physical facts. Tobias was at his art program until 7. The sound wasn't him. It wasn't the washing machine either. I kept still, heart steady but mind alert. Confusion makes noise, but wisdom whispers. Measure twice. I stepped into the kitchen. Valora stood at the butcher block, knife in her left hand. I froze, noticing. She was always right-handed when slicing, proud of her steady grip. Tonight, her movements were off. Then she called out, not Buddy as she always did, but Mikey. Set the table. My stomach tightened. Tobias had never been Mikey in this home. Testing her, I asked lightly, "Valora, hand me the pecan pie recipe card." Her brow furrowed. Hesitation flickered. She had baked that pie every Thanksgiving since she married Jarrett. She never forgot. My voice calm. I asked, "You sure you're okay?" She smiled, too polished, like a rehearsed line. I didn't argue. I logged the details, knife hand. Wrong nickname. Failed memory. A home is a ledger and the numbers don't lie when the dinner bell rings. I poured tea, asked about Tobias's homework, watching her stumble through a vague answer. Quietly. I made my own entry time. Action, deviation, my ledger had begun. I texted Jarrett one neutral message. "Call later. All safe." No panic, he needed clear skies in that cockpit. I slid the porch lock into place and flipped the Ring camera to continuous record. These were small acts, but they mattered. Dignity, I'd learned, is a fence you mend before the wolf tests it. The knife stopped mid-chop. Valora lifted her face, lips curved, eyes cold. Tobias's sneakers squeaked from the hall, but the sound came from the wrong direction. My hands didn't tremble as I set my cup down. "Tell me again," I said softly. "Which drawer holds the pie card?" Her smile spread, painted wide, but it never reached her eyes. Valora's smile lingered from the kitchen doorway, painted on like a mask. I didn't answer it with words. Instead, I lifted my teacup and let the silence between us stretch thin. In my mind, a ledger opened a habit I had kept for decades. Whenever something didn't line up, I wrote it down, if not on paper, then in the creases of my memory. The stove hummed behind me. The porch light clicked on outside, and the evening neighborhood in Charleston rolled along like nothing was amiss. Yet inside me, alarms ticked softly. I told myself, age teaches you that truth rarely knocks, it seeps through the cracks. So I held still, choosing to watch rather than speak. Tobias's laughter floated faintly as he came home from art class. And that sound reminded me what mattered most. Sometimes silence isn't weakness, it's reconnaissance. A vibration broke the moment the buzz of my phone. Jarrett's message appeared. Boarding complete. Talk later. Relief for his safety lasted only a second before another glow caught my eye. On the counter, Valora's iPad lit up. A new text flashed bold landing safe. Dinner at 9 V. My heart tightened. She stood across from me stirring pasta. Yet someone, under her name, claimed to be landing. Valora, I asked lightly, did you just text Jarrett? Her spoon slowed and she gave a short laugh. Oh, old drafts. You know how these gadgets are. Too quick, too tidy. I noticed the rhythm stir. Swipe, delay. Not natural. I scribbled quietly on the back of an envelope, message 7:45 p.m. She in kitchen. Just one line, but it mattered. Tobias dropped his backpack at the doorway, shattering the tension with the simplicity only a child can bring. A lie is like a badly sewn hem. The stitch will snag if you keep walking. Valora turned that moment into a deflection. Kids and screens, they always mess up the times, she said, pointing a finger at a generation not even present. I smiled. Calm, darlin'. I've kept ledgers longer than you've had a credit score. Don't mistake memory for record. She stiffened, and Tobias's eyes darted between us. Grandma, why are you writing notes about Mom? His voice was small but clear. Valora's face darkened, but I smoothed the air. Grandma writes everything down. It's how I remember who I am. Elders know recipes. Debts, blessings, all stay honest in ink. The pen may not stop betrayal, but it proves you weren't dreaming. Later that night, Tobias padded into my room, clutching his book. Grandma, he whispered. Mommy sounded different last night. She called me Michael. Who's Michael? My breath caught. No child invents such things. I pulled him close. What did she look like? He shrugged. Like Mommy, but shiny. She didn't tuck me in the same way. His words cut sharper than any knife. Children are the only mirrors that never learn to flatter. I kissed his forehead and promised, in this house. Truth stays with Grandma. He nodded and slid under the blanket, trusting my voice more than the world. When the house settled, I tucked deeds, wills, and my late husband's letters into the safe. Valora's humming floated from the kitchen, bright but brittle. I whispered a prayer not for safety, but for clarity. Patience is not passivity. It's strategy stretched across time. Just as I dimmed Tobias's lamp, I heard footsteps in the hall again, too close to his. Valora appeared, knife still in her left hand, though dinner was long finished. Everything all right, she asked. Smile too tight? I closed the boy's door gently. The house, I thought, has two versions of her now. The smile she wore was a mask, and I was the only one taking attendance. The night had been heavy with questions, but morning came all the same. I rose early, tied on my old apron, and swept the porch before most neighbors stirred. The steady scratch of the broom calmed me. I wrote my grocery list, checked the Ring camera, and circled the date on the calendar. These little anchors kept me from drifting in uncertainty. Bills stacked neatly on the counter. Casserole cooling for supper, it was the rhythm of a woman who knew that order exposes lies. I told myself I'd pick up Tobias from school myself today. Routines, once tightened, shine a light on deceit. With quiet hands, I wrote last night's events in my notebook times, actions, slips of the tongue, No judgments, just facts. Resolve, I thought, is the quiet between the breaths. Right before the door opens, by late afternoon, a firm knock broke the hum of the house. Avis Ruddock stood on my porch, her scarf tugged snug against the breeze. She pressed a folded note into my hand. "Honey," she said softly, "that perfume last night? Not Valora's usual. I smelled it clear through the hedges." Her frown held no malice, only concern. I asked what time, and she answered her memory landed on the exact mark I'd already written. Confirmation. I didn't pry for more. I thanked her and kept my dignity. The South has its rules, and neighbors know when to lend a mirror. Community is the choir that catches the note you can't carry alone. That evening, I called Valora into the kitchen. Light from the overhead fixture fell between us, sharp and honest. I kept my voice level. "We won't discuss feelings," I said. "We'll discuss facts. I've seen patterns, timestamps, your hand switching, names that don't belong. And last night, the perfume, Avis smelled it. Her laugh rang thin. You're old-fashioned. Eudora. Scents cling in stores. I didn't argue. This is your chance to be clean. Don't waste it. Tobias's after-school routine is with me this week. Any flights or delays, I want it in writing." Her smile cracked at the edges. I ended it there. Not the respect, but the conversation. A fence is not a fight. It's where we decide what comes in. After dishes, Valora slipped out to the store. I pulled on my sweater and followed a block behind. Charleston's dusk wrapped the streets in magnolia shadows and brick alleys, lamps flickering against the damp air. Her car turned down a side street near short-term rentals. I slowed by a lamppost, murmuring the license plate letters like a hymn. A dark sedan idled nearby. My heart pressed fast, but I kept my stride sensible. You don't wrestle a storm, you tie down what you own and watch the sky. Then my phone vibrated. FaceTime incoming from Valora. The preview showed our kitchen island bathed in warm light, as if she stood there now. I froze, let it ring out, then watched as a left-handed grip appeared on screen. Proof. I captured the image, then snapped the address plaque on the rental house. Jarrett's text chimed. On-time departure. We'll call after landing. I answered simply. All calm. My son needed clear skies, not storms from home. I turned back, choosing timing over confrontation. A trap isn't sprung by shouting, it closes because you said it right. Back at the house. I exhaled slow, only to notice the family car door left ajar. In the glove compartment lay a fresh receipt, time-stamped minutes ago, tied to that same side street, under the stove light. I smoothed the paper flat in my ledger. Then, for the first time, I drew a single, careful line beneath all the entries. The math had turned from suspicion to sum. By the next afternoon, I decided facts would be my only meal. I moved through the house with deliberate order, porch light tested, mail stacked, supper pared down to something simple, so my mind stayed sharp. I reread yesterday's ledger entries. Times, sounds, that perfume. The FaceTime image and underlined one line seek external proof. My Ring camera was reset to filter out the oak branches that kept tricking it. I wore plain shoes, a cardigan pressed neat in the South. Composure is currency. My son's last message sat pinned on my phone, untouched. I wouldn't burden his cockpit with storms. Proof needed to be independent of me. Order is a lantern, carry it, and shadows explain themselves. When Jarrett texted before boarding, his words were clipped. Final checks, what do you need? I breathed steady and typed, only look with your own eyes. Minutes later, a photo came through from just past the jet bridge. Passengers blurred in the background, but one detail caught me like a hook. The indigo and gold silk scarf Valora wore that Easter knotted in her exact style. Fringe frayed at one end. I zoomed until the thread stood plain on the screen. Gate number, departure time. Scarf pattern all logged in black ink. My hand didn't shake as I slid the file into a folder labeled Artifacts. If you can circle it with a finger, you can circle it in a courtroom. I wouldn't accuse by text. Instead, I printed the photo on matte paper, the kind that doesn't glare under kitchen light, and slipped it into a manila folder. One line rehearsed itself in my head. These are your eyes, not my memory. Certainty is not a feeling. It's a footprint that matches the shoe. Later that evening, I reached for the velvet box where Valora's wedding necklace should rest. Empty. I checked the laundry room, the dish by the sink, even Tobias's toy box, no chain, no pendant. A message buzzed from a church friend. Isn't this Valora attached was a public post geotagged at a gallery in Manhattan. The woman in the photo smiled under bright lights, and around her neck lay the very necklace I had given at their wedding. I knew the clasp's old spring ring, the nick near the setting from when my husband once repaired it, and the faint engraving he'd etched. I screenshotted the image, noted the time, 6:42 p.m. In my ledger, I wrote pendant, seen NYC engraving visible. Tobias wandered in, asking for an apple. I handed it to him with a smile. Steady? Children shouldn't carry adult truths. Value isn't the gold. It's the promise hammered into it. At supper, I tested the air. Valora, did you move the necklace for cleaning? I kept my voice gentle, my gaze steady. She laughed, said jewelers recommended restyling, offered no name, no receipt. I let silence do the talking. In Charleston, silence carries teeth. I stacked the plates, aligned forks. The necklace image joined the scarf photo. 2 artifacts, 2 sources. You don't shout at smoke, you follow it to the wire. When the dishes were done, I set the manila folder square on the dining table beneath the overhead light. Its weight was more gravity than paper. On the spine, I penciled Friday visuals. Inside lay the scarf, the necklace. I locked the door, folded my hands, and said aloud, tomorrow. We eat the truth before we eat dinner. The table was no longer for supper, it was for summoning. The morning after I laid that folder on the table, the air in my house felt rearranged. The mail sat in a crooked pile, envelopes unopened. My checkbook was gone from its drawer, and the banking app on my phone demanded a password I hadn't changed. In the kitchen, Valora hummed louder than usual, her voice sugary, too sweet for the hour. I didn't confront her. Instead, I restored my own order, pulled copies of bank statements from the week before, slid them into my folder, and texted an old attorney friend, lunch, soon. Quiet matter. Age teaches you a storm doesn't announce it rearranges the furniture first. At the bank, the teller hesitated, eyes flicking to her screen. Mrs. Linnell, your co-signer adjusted permissions yesterday. My pulse didn't quicken. Valora had slid her name deeper into our accounts, dressed it up as efficiency. I signed calmly, requested notarized hard copies, and carried them out in a manila envelope. Paper beats pixels when the fight is over, truth. Outside, autumn leaves scraped along the sidewalk, and I heard my late husband's words in memory. Money isn't loyalty, Eudora, it's leverage. I marked the folder tab red and wrote F9 in bold ink. When someone grabs your purse, they've already taken your respect. That night at supper, Valora placed the missing checkbook on the table with a shrug. Found it in Tobias's toy bin, she said lightly. Tobias blinked, confused. I didn't flinch. Paper remembers more than people do, I replied, my eyes steady on hers. Tobias asked softly, Grandma, are you mad? I smoothed his hair, just teaching myself new math. A thief who returns the coin thinks they bought silence. By the next evening, Valora shifted tactics. She invited neighbors for dinner. Her smile stretched wide, her voice tuned to charm. Between courses, she sprinkled comments. Eudora misplaces things, thank heaven Tobias always finds them. Laughter bubbled polite, but I sipped my water and waited for silence. Then, clear and calm, I said, yes. Tobias is helpful. That's why he remembers who tucked him in last week and called him Michael. Forks clinked. The room hushed. Valora's laugh came too quick, brittle around the edges. If someone builds a play, the truth waits in the wings. After the guests left, her smile dropped. Why humiliate me, she hissed. I answered steady. I didn't humiliate, I reminded. On the counter, I placed the photo of her scarf face down, then lifted it calmly back into my folder. Timing is power, not volume. Tobias sat watching cartoons in the next room, untouched by the storm. I logged the evening dinner deflection pierced, audience present. The loudest note in a hymn is often the pause before it. late that night. I placed every artifact scarf, necklace, bank papers into a fireproof lockbox. The key hung on a chain around my neck, warm against my skin. If she strikes my ledger, I whispered, she won't strike the copy. Then footsteps crossed my porch. Too heavy for a child, too late for a neighbor. I sat straight, fingers on the key, my heart steady as a gavel. The house no longer slept, it listened. I polished the dining table until the grain shone like glass. Plain white plates. No fuss, no pattern. The room had to feel neutral. Facts don't sit well in fancy china. In the center, the folder marked Friday Visuals waited, and beneath it, an envelope heavy with deeds and documents. I texted Jarrett. Arrive on time. We'll speak in facts. Tobias's homework was done. His chair was placed by my side, safe and shielded. The porch was locked, Ring camera armed, a pitcher of water instead of wine on the table. Hospitality isn't surrender. It's the table where truth can sit down. Before the first knock, I opened the legal envelope, DocuSign printouts. All wrong, the signature loops too wide, the timestamps off by hours. I marked each inconsistency with sticky flags, highlighted the flourish that wasn't mine. The banker's words echoed permissions adjusted. I'd secured notarized copies that could stand in the rain. My line was ready. This is not my hand and not my hour. The door opened. Valora walked in with her polished smile, eyes quick, scanning for advantage. A forged name is theft with manners. I guided the seating. Jarrett on my right, pilot posture, disciplined. Valora directly across, she'd face me head on. Tobias close to me. Buffered from crossfire, I served roasted chicken and green beans, plain and filling. Then, I closed the folder deliberately on the placemat. Tonight, I said evenly. No shouting, no hypotheticals, only timestamps, items, witnesses. Valora chuckled, playful. Is this about the scarf again? I returned steady. It's about the clock. Jarrett's jaw tightened, the same look he wore in turbulence. If we can't agree on the hour, we can't agree on the day. I drew out the documents deeds, access logs, notarized permissions, and spread them like cards. My tone low, measured. Here is where my name walks without me. Valora scoffed, brushing it aside as clerical noise. I kept my eyes on Jarrett, not her. I tapped the forged loop on the signature line. My checks had never curled that way, not in 40 years. Tobias fidgeted, and I placed my hand gently over his, grounding him in adult calm. Precision is how the small hand points to the truth. Then came the trap. I slid the printed photo of the scarf on the jet bridge time-stamped boarding time. Beside it, the FaceTime screenshot from our kitchen at the same hour. One woman cannot stand in two doors at once, I said. I dialed Corinna Slate, airline clerk, on speaker. Her calm voice filled the room. Departure pushed back at 7:42 p.m. Boarding complete at 7:36. I laid down one more piece, the Manhattan Gallery post. The necklace gleaming minutes after boarding. Jarrett exhaled. Steady, but wet-eyed. Valora's voice cracked into laughter. Photos can be edited. My answer. Not the airline's clock. When the clock testifies, the room must listen. I spoke evenly. Hands folded. This house will not host two versions of you. I placed the legal envelope in the center. There are consequences for signatures you don't own. The overhead light hummed. Tobias squeezed my fingers, and Jarrett gave a single, firm nod. Valora's chair scraped back 1 hard inch. Dinner was over. Judgment had not yet begun. The morning after our dinner confrontation, the house felt hollow, like the echoes of voices still clung to the walls. I rose before dawn, the air heavy despite the sunlight slanting across my kitchen tiles. The table sat there, stripped of food but stained with memory, carrying more weight than any courtroom. I poured myself black coffee, bitter enough to match the silence. Tobias patted in, rubbing his eyes, and asked if Valora would cook breakfast. I set toast and jam before him, deflecting. Jarrett left quietly for his short-haul flight, hugging me tighter than he had in years. Outside, cars slowed as they passed, curtains twitched. Charleston doesn't whisper softly. It hums with rumor. After thunder. The air is honest, even if the ground is muddy. At the market. Avis Ruddock leaned close, voice lowered to a thread. Honey. Folks say Valora was seen in 2 places at once. Now that's a story. I nodded, dropping apples into my bag, letting silence hold my answer. Another church elder touched my arm gently. We pray for clarity, Eudora. But some things don't need prayer, just witnesses. Gossip here isn't idle chatter. It's a ledger the town keeps collectively. Valora arrived soon after. Her smile stretched too wide, voice sugar sweet. Eudora misplaces things, she told the cashier brightly, but I keep her organized. I met her eyes without blinking. Around us, the crowd noticed the strain. Truth doesn't knock on doors, it slips out through neighbors' lips. Sunday service was no refuge for her. She insisted on attending with Tobias, parading normalcy down the aisle. But whispers rippled as the choir passed around the printed scarf photo. Quiet as a passing hymn. The pastor's sermon cut sharp. A double life cannot serve one God. People's eyes drifted toward her pew. Valora shifted, fingers gripping the hymnal so tight the edges bent. After service, Deacon leaned toward me. Sometimes silence is your testimony. I nodded, steadier now. Community had moved from audience to witness. Reputation is a quilt. When one patch tears, the whole bed feels the draft. By Monday evening, the knock came firm, deliberate, no mistaking it for a neighborly call. Deputy Corinna Slate stood on my porch, folder in hand. Mrs. Linnell, we need a word. Inside was a subpoena for financial records, forged signatures under review. Valora swept down the stairs in her silk robe, her voice syrupy, sweet officer. Surely this is a misunderstanding. Corinna didn't blink. That's what paper is for. Tobias clung to my hip, his eyes wide. I bent to him softly. Upstairs. Sweetheart, grown folks are sorting grown mistakes. Valora's smile cracked at the edges, fingers tugging nervously at her robe's tie. Law is slow walking, but its steps never turn back. Corinna laid it plain. Bank logs, airline confirmations, necklace appraisal, already filed. Valora snapped back. She forged it to frame me. Corinna raised a brow. Ma'am, timestamps don't forge themselves. Silence dropped heavy as stone. Tobias peeked down from the banister, sensing something final shifting. My voice was even. Children deserve a house without double stories. Corinna nodded, slid papers across the table, and left Valora with a notice to appear. Neighbors gathered outside, quiet clusters of eyes carrying judgment sharper than any gavel. Valora slammed the door, but the sound felt weaker than the knock that had preceded it. A mask cracked in public can't be glued in private. That night, our supper table had one chair empty. Tobias looked at it, then at me, his voice barely a whisper. Grandma, will she come back? I stroked his hair, steady but sorrowful. Sometimes gone is safer than here. On the table lay the folder scarf, necklace, bank logs, all now less proof and more protection. Outside. The autumn wind rattled the shutters, and the house felt safer, though lonelier. I whispered into the quiet. Truth has stepped out the door. What walks back in, I cannot control. The chair was empty, but the trial was only beginning. I rose before dawn, the ledger spread across the table. Folder tabs stacked like soldiers' visuals, finance, docs. Today was not for waiting. It was for doing. I drafted my list, call the attorney, freeze accounts, alert the bank, set the porch camera to watch every step. Jarrett came in from his early flight, weary but sharp-eyed. I told him each step plain. No drama. Tobias's day would run as steady as always. School, homework, supper, safety wrapped in routine. By the door, I placed a copy of the house deed and a notice to vacate, drafted by counsel. Decision made, tonight this ended. A plan is faith-wearing work boots. The attorney's voice filled the kitchen over speakerphone, calm and precise. Fraud alerts, filed. Joint access revoked. Meeting with Deputy Corinna Slate confirmed. Jewelry appraisal, pendant post, chain of custody, all logged tight. I signed the trust update, shifting assets to Tobias with Jarrett as trustee. Valora no longer had standing. Spare keys collected into a jar. Locksmith scheduled for 8. I repeated my 3 lines aloud until they sat firm in my chest. This house hosts one truth. Timestamps aren't opinions. Paper outranks chatter. Jarrett stood steady beside me. not in front. Paper is the quietest weapon that wins the longest wars. By late afternoon, Valora swept in. Her smile rehearsed, her voice smooth as glass, her phone lit up with Silas Drexler's name I didn't miss the hour noted. I poured water, not wine, and set the doc's envelope on the table. Inside, notarized permissions, bank logs, airline stamps, the pendant photo. My voice stayed low. Pick one story and live it, but not here. She tried her old gaslight, blaming my age, Jarrett's absences, the chaos of paperwork. I slid the scarf photo beside the FaceTime. Still, proof in plain daylight. Jarrett broke his silence once Mom deals in facts. So do I. The hush that followed belonged to us. I offered counsel's terms leave tonight with escort, or stay for service and barred access. Mercy isn't forgetting. It's refusing to live with a lie. We stepped onto the porch as the autumn sun burned gold across the street. Deputy Slade approached with her folder. Papers crisp. Neighbors lined the sidewalks, Avis Ruddock, front and center. Arms folded. Valora stammered, but the sound was thin. Silas arrived in his polished car. Late as always, ready to talk over the deputy. She cut him off, sir. Your name appears on transfers. You'll get your copy. I handed Valora a final envelope, one check labeled household settlement, and a letter that read, "This is the last check you'll ever cash in my name." Behind us, the locksmith van turned the corner. Timing, not fury. Close this chapter. You don't slam doors to end a chapter. You turn the key and walk forward. Inside, I found Isolde Marston at the table. Hands trembling, I poured her tea and offered to plan a room here for now. Part-time hours, keeping my records. Work, not pity. Jarrett apologized to her straight on, no excuses. Tobias bounded in, holding a school drawing of 3 hands around a house. I taped it on the fridge beside the calendar. The gallery confirmed the pendant's return. The police liaison would arrange it. I closed the ledger with a final line, not a question mark. Home is what's left standing after you tell the truth. As dusk fell, the porch light clicked on. A courier slipped an envelope through the slot. Return address, a rural hospital archive. Inside lay a photocopied birth record, 2 infants listed. One name scrubbed by time. My breath steadied. Some storms end, some roads begin. The house was quiet, and the past had finally knocked.